Hello. So it says here that Rayner is backing down on her introduction of what the Telegraph calls secretive plans for Islamophobia legislation. I wouldn't call it backing down exactly. According to the Telegraph, the consultation she set up is going to be extended by a whole week. However, more people will be given access to the links so they can record their opinions. This is after the Free Speech Union, headed by Lord Young, accused her of drawing up the legislation behind closed doors. The legislation is based on a document dreamt up by the APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which uses the made-up word Islamophobia and then defines it as a sort of racism. That's along the same lines as if I'd have invented the word snarfy blatflot and then told you that it was a name for a shade of yellow that's really purple. In this case, the word is Islamophobia, and the definition is that it is rooted in racism and a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness, which makes about as much sense as talking about a yellowish purple. Notice that they say not that it means racism, but that it is rooted in racism, which is a way of separating meaning from word. Rooted in isn't the same as being, and it makes no sense. After all, Snakes and Ladders, the children's game, is rooted in a Hindu ceremonial rite which recapitulates dharmic ideas about the soul striving for liberation but getting waylaid by sins, usually depicted as dragons. So hence the snakes in the English version. But saying that Snakes and Ladders is rooted in Hindu theology doesn't actually tell you anything about the children's board game now, does it? All right, I'm Granniopteryx. Please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. If you're a newcomer to my channel and want to contribute financially, I am of course really grateful, but I thought I'd warn you that I fritter everything away on my horse and the rescue horse I'm taking care of, both of which turn money into heaps of manure even quicker than the Labour Party is turning Britain into a heap of bollocks. So this is a boiled down version of the original working group's paper, which was 70 pages long. And at one certain point, you start to think that maybe something is unnecessarily long to stop people from understanding it. Anyway, it's this bit, the boiled down version here, starts badly right there in the title. Islamophobia. Gotcha. You see, we have a word here, and it's a word that means nothing. A phobia, as many of you already have remarked, a phobia is an irrational fear, like acrophobia, a fear of open spaces, or sesquipedalophobia, which is a fear of long words. I've been waiting my whole life to use that one. And if you're afraid of Islam, then that's just another phobia. Nobody should get prosecuted for claustrophobia, should they? What they're trying to say is not Islamophobia, but Islamomisia, which would mean a hatred of Islam. And last time I checked, you're allowed to do that too. After all, no one has ever said that it is a prosecutable offence to hate Catholicism or high-heeled shoes or broccoli, or whatever. So that doesn't make sense either. No, what they've done to make it some sort of a crime is that they've had to conflate a dislike of Islam or a disagreement with Islam with racism. And of course, being racist is the very worst thing you can be in this society. Forget murder or treachery or cannibalism or a mature, I have to be careful here about the language I use, or a mature man who's interested in girls of a slightly smaller size. Forget all of those. What's really, really, really bad is racism. So just remember that. And as long as you can make Islamophobia, that made-up word, into a word that means racism, you've got it made. So Islamophobia is criticism of expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness, which could mean, for instance, that if I say halal slaughter is cruel and unnecessary, well, halal slaughter is an expression of Muslimness, isn't it? Which would mean I could be prosecuted for Islamophobia. It's just sloppy language. Sloppy language makes bad laws, and the proposal for this law is about as sloppy as Angela Rayner's dress sense. The way it's phrased now, the law could be applied to almost any criticism of the Muslim religion. Halal slaughter, polygamy, cousin marriage, child marriage, unequal inheritance, even honour killing. And it would trap any critic, including secular campaigners and ex-Muslims. In fact, ex-Muslims are going to be particularly vulnerable, seeing as they've left Islam because they disagree with it. As has been pointed out, it is a de facto blasphemy law, limiting open debate about religious doctrines. Now, let's see. And this is written by somebody with a name that appears to show that he did come from a Muslim family. Labour's Islamophobia policy threatens free speech. It doesn't even have to be the religion. If you talk about the demographic threat, you'd be contravening that law. Let's go back to this boiled down version. Here we are. Demographic threat. You'd be contravening that law. This would curtail discussions about immigration policies or demographic trends, even when based on data. For instance, saying projections that Europe's Muslim population might reach 58 million by 2030 could be construed as Islamophobic under this particular wording, even if you're trying to conduct a sociological study on educational needs, or housing requirements, or even health projections of various sorts. So there's an ex-counter-terror chief called Neil Basu, and he warned in 2019 that the APPG definition could allow terror suspects to challenge investigations by claiming investigations are Islamophobic. And what's going to happen is that mainstream media will always be second-guessing themselves about printing anything critical of Islam. I mean, if this thing becomes law, which means what's going to happen is they'll just avoid the subject. And so there'll be this huge gap in our general information pool. And of course, people like me will be constantly looking over our shoulders, and occasionally one or two of us are going to end up being Lucy Connolly'd, aren't we? Speaking as an academic, or at least an ex-academic, I can predict that the effect on academic research will reduce university studies to the same low level as you get in universities in most Muslim countries, and for the same reason. The fact is that universities are huge cowards. Huge cowards. They'll avoid any subjects they see as controversial. Oriental studies departments will close down, and the only study of Islam thereafter will be in Muslim-funded religious colleges, which will increase a push to conversions. And of course, there will be history departments, for instance, or even literature departments. This is already happening, but it doesn't have the backing of the law just yet. I have something here about that. Just a minute. there's somebody at the door. Just a minute. I don't know, there's something about me starting to record a video that brings the postman. Anyway, so there's this article here, and this is from a while ago. It's from 2023. A University of Bristol professor's anger at Islamophobia claim. A university professor was falsely accused of Islamophobia. So already the word is there. Instead of him saying a ridiculous idea from a student with an agenda, it's already falsely accused of Islamophobia, like you're being falsely accused of fraud or something like that. He was at the University of Bristol, and in October 2021, the university said its investigation into a module, external, I don't know what that means, taught by Professor Greer, found no evidence of Islamophobic speech. So he'd been accused of this, and the university again, you see what I mean about them being big cowards. It said it acknowledged the regrettable impact social media posts had on him. Professor Greer, an expert in criminal justice, human rights, law and counter-terrorism, said the university mishandled the case. Oh, well, they didn't mishandle the case. You see, they heard the word Islamophobia and they just, their brains switched off. A lecturer in the university's law school at the time, he said, "I'm not an Islamophobe." Again, the same thing. He's buying into their language. He said the complaint from the University of Bristol Islamic Society was a potentially life-threatening campaign based on nothing but lies, distortion and misrepresentation. So the episode began when there was a discussion with students taking a human rights module about the massacre of cartoonists and journalists working for the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris in 2015. He said that as the academic literature on the course debated the traditional death penalty for blasphemy in Islam, that the attacks could be seen as an example of freelancers taking it upon themselves to punish somebody by exacting the death penalty. One student complained to the law school, and after an exchange of emails between him and the faculty, he said he would not use the Charlie Hebdo example again. And that is without the backing of the law. You see what's happening here. And so it will just get worse when the law is behind that. He would have definitely been found guilty and sacked. And it would have effects on political campaigns and debates, everything. The APPG definition will almost certainly discourage politicians from raising legitimate concerns about community issues. Ordinary citizens will hesitate to express opinions, even at home, if they think their kids might report something to a teacher. That has also happened. But again, just at present, it doesn't get the police involved. Or if it does, the case ends up getting dropped after the parents have had a bit of grief. As for making things safer for Muslims, it won't. If people feel that Muslims are being given special attention, that's going to cause resentment. It's also going to stop people from interacting with Muslims for fear of ending up being misunderstood about a casual comment. Just like Professor Greer had trouble about a comment to do with Charlie Hebdo, which was nothing more than the truth. But society will just splinter and divide into small mono groups. Now, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you might think that's what the Labour Party is after, because a lot of people in the Labour Party seem to be intent on destroying Britain. However, let's get off that. So, when it's the law, what will happen is organisations, various sorts of organisations, will adopt it as a form of self-defence. So in the end, it'll influence workplace policies, educational institutions, public services. It would certainly lead to increased litigation or complaints, just like that Professor Greer thing, as individuals or groups challenge perceived Islamophobic actions. And it will eventually lead some employers to covertly avoid hiring Muslims to protect themselves from potential accusations of Islamophobia. And as it's noted, as it's noticed that various places there seem to be far fewer Muslims than there are in the area, they will then start making legislation insisting that certain companies employ a certain percentage of Muslims. Because you see, statistically, Muslims are more likely to be unemployed anyway. That's statistics. I don't know how legal I will be to say that in a little while. But yeah, statistically, Muslims are more likely to be unemployed. And of course, this is going to make the situation worse. But any business that will employ Muslims will be putting itself into a pretty, parlous position. They may employ 100 hard-working, unfanatical Muslims, but all it would take would be one fanatic who starts insisting that all the Muslims have to take time off to pray during the day, or insisting on nobody, whatever their religion, is allowed to eat when the Muslims are fasting for Ramadan, or requiring that there should be a special prayer room set aside. You see, and all the moderate ones, the ones that don't really care, they'd feel themselves bullied into following along, because that is also a characteristic of especially the Pakistani Muslim community. And so what will happen is you'll have all these not that involved Muslims going along with the one fanatic, and any pushback from the boss would result in an Islamophobia suit, because it would be law. And we'd have similar effects on education, of course. We all know about the Batley School, don't we? Well, listen to this guy making a speech outside the Batley School. Just in case you're a newcomer to this, what happened was a teacher in I think it was a religion lesson or civics or something. Anyway, he showed a cartoon of Muhammad, which he told students who were Muslims that if they didn't want to take that particular class, they could go out. But one or two of them stayed, took offence, went back home, and there was a riot outside the school. And there was a huge crowd, and the school was closed down, and the teacher was threatened. Of course, the teachers' union gave away his name and address. I'm talking about institutions being big cowards, aren't I? And this speech was made outside the school.
A clear attempt to stir up religious hatred.
You see, the teacher, in teaching this class, which, by the way, it was part of the national curriculum, he's stirring up religious hatred. That's how he has it.
We also use this opportunity to call upon the entire British Muslim community to review the materials being taught in their children's schools, whether they relate to offensive content or inappropriate relationship and sex education.
Right, there you are. Do you see? So now he is dictating what the schools can teach. And if there was an Islamophobia law, that sort of fanatic would be reporting the school to the police. So what would happen? The headmaster was a big coward anyway. He didn't back up his teacher, and they're all like that. So what would happen is that the school would be ending up limiting discussions about religion or culture. And then there's, of course, the political pressure. It used to be that a political party had to wait until a political adversary was caught with his hands in the till or in an intimate relationship with a sheep or something. But now all they'd have to do is find a speech in which a political opponent says something critical about Islam or grooming gangs or migrant dinghies or anything like that, and they'd have him banged to rights. Because this law, let's find it again, because this law is so badly worded. And you say, oh, it won't happen. Yeah, that's what they said about Section 5 of the Public Order Act. Let me bring that up here. Section 5 of the Public Order Act was enacted in 1986, and it was specifically to address the problem of people using insulting words or behaviour in public. It was passed to help the police deal with low-level disorder like drunken brawls in pubs. And at the time, it was criticised for not being precise enough. Sloppy language again. But the answer was that it would be applied, and so The government at the time said, it will only be applied to help the police manage the aforementioned small incidents. Swearing or cursing in pubs. Then, in 2010, a street preacher was arrested and fined for expressing his religious opinions. And in 2011, a teenager was arrested for holding up a sign saying Scientology was a cult. Now, obviously, a lot of police don't seem to be that bright recently, and perhaps they'd misread the word cult for something else. I don't know. Whatever. It caused a lot of fuss when that teenager was arrested, and they dropped the charges finally, and in the end the government had to amend the law, here we are, to remove the word insulting. So, back to the latest Angela Rayner disaster. What can it do? Well, it will stifle free speech. It will stifle theological discussion. It will stifle policy debates, security discussions, media commentary, academic inquiry, political discourse, everyday interactions between ordinary people. It could rip apart community cohesion, legal systems, workplaces, education, political dynamics. And you know what? Sometimes, as I said, you have to wonder if that's precisely what the Labour Party actually wants to do. Well, let's think about that. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.